Hi, I'm Mary Greendale, and this is Just Thinking. Well, I'm just thinking, and so are a lot of other people, but we're not even in the studio. We can't be in the studio because of the COVID-19 crisis. Bruce Guilfoy is at the ready, organizing and managing this Zoom conversation. I wanted to get a few people together to talk about what's happening in Holliston, if anything, how we're doing, how are we handling ourselves, and are things good? Do we need help, more help than we're getting? What's going on? Before I start, I really think it's appropriate just to pause for a minute and to thank the people who are on the front lines, as everybody calls it. We have lots of first responders, obviously our whole fire department, police department, and the EMTs and so forth, and they've certainly had their hands full. But we have lots of people who live here who are doctors and nurses and CNAs that work at nursing homes, and people who help the elderly as home health aides, and all of those people, and then all of the people who work in the stores and at CVS and Super at providing us the services that we are able to go out and get. So to all of them, we do say thank you, and to everybody, stay safe. I mean, that's obviously the biggest thing on all of our minds. So this reminds me of that TV show, you know, whatever Squares, I don't know, whatever the name of it was, Hollywood Squares, where they were all comics. So I'm expecting every one of my guests to be funny today. So start rehearsing. At any rate, I'm going to have you introduce yourselves, although I could easily do that, but let's introduce yourselves, and Stacey, I'll start with you, and we'll just go, you know, cross. However, go ahead, we'll figure it out. Go ahead, Stacey.
Good afternoon, I'm Stacey Raffi. I'm one of the members of the Holliston School Committee. I have two children living with me, working with me, roommates for the past 8 weeks, if you will. So welcome to, it's great to see my fellow colleagues and friends here.
Is Eric working?
He is working from home.
Working from home. Oh, that in itself is an adjustment. Okay, Linda Marshall, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm the director of the Senior Center. And we're doing a mix of being open and working remotely. When I'm not doing work for that, I'm also the primary caregiver for my own 90-year-old mom who suffers from dementia and other issues. So I have her here with me. So it's a balancing act. I'm trying to take care of all of the needs of everybody. So yep. Seniors are my life, no matter where I am.
Yeah, I guess so. Bonnie?
I'm Reverend Bonnie Steinroeder. I'm the minister of the First Congregational Church here in town, and I have been the pastor there now for 10 years.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. All right, Michael?
Thank you. Michael Cassidy, Fire Chief and Emergency Management Director for the town of Holliston, and I've been Chief of the department for 20 years. I have been working full-time for the department since 1995.
He was a mere boy when he started. But here he is in charge of this whole COVID response in Holliston. So anyway, Jackie?
Hey, Mary. First off, thank you for inviting me to be on here. It's a pleasure to be with everybody today. I am the director of a town department known as Holliston Youth and Family Services.
A very needed and worthy cause here. All right, Bob.
My name is Bob Malone. My formal name that you see on documents is Kevin Robert Malone. That's a story that I'm not going to tell right now. I'm on the Council on Aging. I've been on that for about 10 years. I serve as chair. I'm on the Board of Library Trustees. I've been there for a few years. I serve there as chair. Apparently I can't avoid these things, I don't know. I'm also the state appointee to the Holliston Housing Authority, which has primary responsibility for Cole Court and some of the housing at Cutler Heights. And I do a lot of consulting for the Diocese of Massachusetts, the Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts, and a lot of work at my church, St. Michael's, here in town.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, you're all very involved people. Michael, I'm going to start with you and just ask, how are we doing?
As a community, I think we're doing quite well. When the Commonwealth of Massachusetts releases their data on a weekly basis, our rates of positive COVID cases per 100,000, when compared to many of the other communities around us, as well as throughout the state, we do have a lower rate than a lot of other communities in our region. So I think that we're doing quite well right now.
That's good. How many cases do we have right now? It was like 40, 42, something like that.
As of the taping of this episode, we have 42 total positive cases with 1 COVID-related fatality and 22 cases having resolved. We have 19 active cases still.
Okay, wish all of those folks a speedy recovery. I'm assuming because we do not have some sort of spike about that the nursing home in town has been okay. People have been tested and everything is okay at the nursing home.
We have not had any residents at Timothy Daniels who have been diagnosed with COVID. That is correct.
That's good. That's a biggie. That is a real biggie. So I'm going to ask you, Bonnie, because I'm sure that because of the church relationship and everybody in town knows who you are. So let's do the, okay, Miss Bonnie, tell me, how are things and what's going on, and are people doing okay?
You know, I think everybody is struggling. I think that I have found, so for our church, for example, like I never trained to be a televangelist. I joke that I want one of those crystal cathedrals or whatever it was called, you know. So now we're on Zoom totally on Sunday mornings. We do have most people join us. I'm lucky to have Richard Laraga who can do the technical work. But I think people come, and when they come onto our Sunday service, you know, they're smiling, they're happy to see each other. By the time we get to the joys and the concerns, I can feel it, and I think everybody else can too, that we're all going through losses in certain ways, but we're afraid. How do I want to say this? So for example, for me, my daughter is expecting a baby any day. She lives in California. I can't be with her. I was supposed to be with her. My grandchildren live in Westwood. I haven't seen them in 2 months. And while I feel that loss, part of me is like, but I have it so much better than other people, you know, who are facing loss of job. And so what I find is that everybody's like, this is hard, but I know that I have it good. And so we kind of hold that gratitude with the longing, with the sorrow, and we just let it all come out together, and it just both exist, you know, they coexist. But I think I have been so impressed for the most part about how, not just in my church, we have ecumenical Bible studies with the other churches in town. People have really reached out to try to support one another. You know, if someone hears that there's a need, people want to help during this time. And I think it has brought out the best of us in some ways. I mean, if you stay off of Holliston Happy, that doesn't bring out the best of us. But aside from that, I feel like there are ways which it really has brought out the best in people, made people more appreciative. I know it has for me, about my relationships and all those things I take for granted, and a real sense of pulling together as a community.
I agree with you. I live with 2 teenagers, well, actually 4 teenagers, but most of the time it's only 2. And they haven't been able to see their mother, who's been in chemotherapy. And so they haven't been with her for this entire time. They've seen her in the driveway. So there are little, you know, there are spots of like, that's really sad, that's going to be tough. I have a senior graduating in Natick. You know, she's bummed out, but Natick will have a graduation in August. Those aren't life and death. Liz's treatments had that potential, but she's done very well. But you're right, it is, you almost feel guilty if you complain and you say, oh God, I'm so tired of having, you know, whatever. It's like, hit yourself on the side of the head because you're among the lucky ones. You're among the lucky ones. I do want to do a shout out to Bruce at HCAT, Holliston Cable Access Television, because he has been doing the churches and the services for not just the Congregational church, but all of the churches. And I think it has been a huge asset for the community. We've gotten some great feedback, but I think it's provided some solace for people at a time when they really, really needed it. So anyway, Bob, let's talk about your favorite subject, or maybe your least favorite subject, and that is how are we managing with the seniors? And Linda's gonna, you two are gonna share this conversation, but how are we doing?
I'm gonna let Linda do most of the talking about it. I'm gonna say one thing though, and this is not meant as a criticism, just an observation for maybe future attention. I think we forget sometimes that seniors are not as technologically capable as a lot of us are, and we may use the resources like the town website and other sources for information, but seniors, there are a lot of seniors that don't necessarily do that for whatever reason. They're not comfortable with computers, they don't have computers, their eyesight is troubling. There's a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And so reaching out to seniors and providing information to them sometimes devolves to the old tried and true method of putting something in the mail that they can get and read. And I think we forget that sometimes.
It's a really good point.
And one of the things I'd like to see us do is develop perhaps some kind of an improvement for ways that we can use the senior center database of mailing addresses, so that if there is important information, like the mask issue, when that was decreed by the Board of Health. Now that was a small item, but for example, if there was a list of resources that seniors could turn to, that's the kind of thing that would be nice to put in the mail to them and let them have. So I'd like us to perhaps at some point think about how we could capitalize on that. I do understand that we're going to use the reverse phone calls to talk about the early balloting for the town election. And I think that's, again, something that the seniors might not some of them might not necessarily know about unless there's a tried and true method of communication. And I think the reverse phone call in that case is probably going to be very helpful to get that information out to seniors.
Michael, what does the dial, when you the automatic recognition ID on a phone call, if it's coming from the town and from that service, does it say Town of Holliston?
So we have several caller IDs that are pre-programmed into the Blackboard Connect system, and depending on what department the call is related to will determine whose caller ID. So if it's a water issue, then it will show up as water department. If it's a Board of Health issue, as last week's notification regarding the mask usage, it came up as Board of Health. So we make sure that it specifies exactly which department it relates to.
Yeah, that's good, because if you just get a number, a lot of people I don't even go to them, just like, whoop, goodbye. Linda, from your standpoint, and obviously you sit on the quote front lines with the senior center, what's happening?
So we are able to do some remote programming, and we're trying to increase that. So one of the big things that we're still able to do is, many folks know, we've always had a lunch program. So they can't come to us. So now we bring the lunches to them.
Really?
So every Monday and Wednesday, our caterer comes in and prepares meals for between 40 and 45 seniors. And they're delivered by staff, and that serves both as the staff bringing the meal, but also a well-being check, so we can actually see that senior, brief as it may be, but at least to know that they're okay, that they're answering their door, and that they can relay any concerns, at least in that brief interaction, that we can help them follow up on. We're working on a newsletter to go out the end of this month, and a lot of that will actually try to contain important information for seniors, because we know that is the best way for us to reach a number of them. So we're doing that. We're providing essential transportation. So if somebody has to get to a doctor's office, to the pharmacy, we've done a few grocery stores, but by and large, we've been able to help people obtain their groceries without the senior themselves physically going to the store, but it is available for those who need or feel very strongly about doing it themselves. Also a group that's very proud and, determined and used to doing without a lot, and managing. But it is important that the people that we talk to by phone, so right now that part actually takes more time, so we have to individually call people to check on them as opposed to seeing a group of folks that come in and, you know, you may only just say hi as you're walking through the room, but you see that they're there, you see that they look okay, you're not hearing any concerns, or they're not coming to your door expressing any concerns. So that's the other part that's hard is the contact and trying to figure that out. We do have a system called My Senior Center where we can do robocalls. Unfortunately, ours does not come from a local number, and that has been one of the issues.
Yeah.
But we can get information to anybody. It's not all seniors. It's only those that have actually registered with us at the senior center. We keep trying to increase that group, but.
Okay, and Jackie and Stacey, you've got either end of sort of the issues with kids and stuff like that. Jackie, why don't you talk to us about how are kids handling it? I mean, you talked to some of the more vulnerable ones. How's it going for them?
Yeah, you know, so for folks who don't know, Holliston Youth and Family Services is a mental health resource center for any Holliston resident. Despite youth being in the title of our department, it's actually open for all ages as well. So any senior, any member of the community, any age. And we have a mission at our department to provide counseling and social services and to promote behavioral health and wellness for the entire community. And so my role is to provide counseling, clinical consultation, to supervise other clinicians, to help all staff provide resources and information to town residents, and to provide educational opportunities, activities, anything that promotes emotional and mental health and wellness in the community. And so we've been around for 20 years or so. I think we started in early 90s, our town department started. And, you know, we're needed, I think, now more than ever. The community is working so hard to collaborate with each other and to promote services and resources that are available. But, you know, we're getting a lot of calls for families that have, you know, basic needs that need to get met: food, shelter, safety, those types of things. By and large, our kids have actually handled it pretty well. You know, this is hard on, it doesn't matter, you know, who you are, you're impacted by this shutdown, you know, that we're all experiencing. And so, of course, if you're a frontline worker, if you're, you know, an older adult, if you're immune compromised, this is scary for you. And it's going to feel different than other people who are going through this. But everybody has their own way of sort of coping with it. And so I think that we're seeing a lot of families, you know, reaching out for help and looking for a teletherapy option, which we've been able to provide. And for the most part, that's actually been very effective in reaching families. So in addition to just providing resources and connection to other services, we've also been doing some teletherapy with community members who need it. So that's been good.
I think we're all going to need it when this is over. You're going to have to do therapy by Zoom call. Groups. Anyway, Stacey, you've got middle schoolers. I have one middle schooler and one just, you know, on the other side of high school, but with his own issues. It is interesting how kids really, really, really need their friends. It's like a real hit in the head when you remember yourself, and it's how much your whole world gravitated around that universe. And boy, I feel sorry for these kids. I really, really do. They are like, they've been in a matter of one day, not slowly, no goodbye, no planning, nothing. Just boom, you're out. And every once in a while, there'll be a heartbreaking comment like, Manny, I'm going to have a yearbook that nobody signed. You know, it's like, we'll be driving around Holliston this summer getting signatures. You know? But it is sad. So how are your family doing, and how are the community's families doing, the school kids?
So it's interesting. I think out of the four of us Raffis, Mom Raffi is having the hardest time. I am the most social. I am an extrovert. And my three lovely family members are all introverts. So it's very interesting to see that on the outside, they all appear to be life is going on the way they like it. And I'm struggling something crazy. You know, I saw Jackie when she first came on, and I was like, feel my hug. I'm a hugger. So for me, you know, for me, human connection, human touch is really important. The kids have been lucky that they're growing up in an area where they play video games with their friends.
Yeah.
So if this had happened when I was a kid, it would have been very different. But
Mhm.
my children and their friends do have ways to connect with one another.
Yep.
But that does not say that I'm not worried. You know, that doesn't mean I'm not worried about, they haven't had, you know, true face-to-face time. They're not riding their bikes with friends. They're not hanging out together. I have heard stories. I know the high school kids in particular
Yeah.
are really struggling with not being able to just go hang out with their friends.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. But I will say, we need to be incredibly proud of our community. Schools, the announcement was made on the evening of March 12th that school was going to be closed for the next, I think it was 2 weeks, and forgive me if I'm off a little bit. The teachers immediately took 2 days to sit down and plan. And on that third day, they had rolled out enrichment activities for the kids for at least that first week. They virtually, you know, they pivoted literally overnight. That's huge.
It is.
And the students also pivoted. And so, you know, sort of like what Bob was saying, you know, we have preschoolers and kindergartners who technology, while yes, you see them swiping on mommy and daddy's phones, you know, technology is not necessarily the way, Zoom meetings aren't the way to educate those little kids, and they don't know how to access it. The situation has made it that some kids can't access the curriculum because they're just, for whatever reason, we know what those reasons are, they can't access the curriculum. They don't want to get out of bed. They might be angry, etc. But we have such a partnership, and Fire Chief Mike can absolutely attest to this, and Jackie, between the fire department, the police department, and youth and family services. Those families are being reached out and connected with, and we're making sure that everybody's got what they need. Every student has a Chromebook. So
Yeah.
even if they don't know how to use it very well, they've got one. And you know, Chief and Jackie can speak to this too. There are visits that are being made at the children's homes to make sure that our most vulnerable are safe. There is lunch provided on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at the Miller School. It is for every child in Holliston under the age of 21. No questions asked, just drive up and tell them how many meals you need. So there's, you know, this is such a dichotomy, right? With all the good, there's maybe not so good. And I think a lot of us are struggling with impatience. We want answers. You know, when am I getting my refund back? What are we doing about X, Y, and Z events that are scheduled? And I think we're trying to follow the chief's, you know, recommendations for how we open or reopen, and he's following the guidelines from the state. And you know, Governor Baker is really being cautious about this. So we just found out a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, that school buildings are closed for the rest of the year. So the administration, they are working round the clock trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean, and how do we cancel? How do we continue to teach the kids? How do we make sure they're ready for next year? And oh, by the way, what are we going to do this summer? And oh, by the way, we have to think about what September 1st is going to look like. So we are busy. Our biggest concern, and I say that from the school committee and the administration, is We just want to make sure our kids are safe and healthy, and we will do what we can to bring the education to them.
It is a challenge, and I know my granddaughter finds it really hard to do it on screen. I find it, I mean, to me, I'm with your family. I'm far more of an introvert than people might think. So from that standpoint, this is fine, you know, not so my little girl. And, you know, that makes it a challenge because you're scared to death. I'm scared to death that she's not going to get out of the year what she needs. Yeah. Anyway,
No,
Michael, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, you're absolutely right, Mary. You know, those are legit concerns. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and because she's not with her mother and she's here, you know, I feel sort of a different kind of obligation than a grandmother normally does, or at least I think. But anyway, Michael, so tell us what's ahead. What's next? I seriously, I listen to Charlie Baker every day as he does his press conference, and I have a lot of respect for him. Built over years ago, I actually worked in the administration when he was a part of A&F. I appreciate his measured approach. I really do. I find it reassuring that he stands there and he explains it, and when he says something, the next day it's still the same thing. So when the reporter keeps asking, you know, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? Well, you know, this is the plan, and the plan has been this, plus this, plus this. I find that reassuring. So I know that we have dates ahead, like on the 18th or whatever, and, you know, that kind of thing, but what's going on behind the scenes? What do they ask you to think about? What are you challenged to consider?
So the same level of intentional and deliberate consideration that you see from the governor with those press conferences goes on at all levels of state and local government. I am on dozens of calls, whether they're Zoom calls, conference calls, we're collaborating all the time, and there's a great information exchange that takes place. The administration is listening to subject matter experts. They're trying to make data-driven decisions, and yet they're also, when they're facing something that they don't normally have that person at the table, they'll rope somebody in to have that discussion. And so, and a perfect example of that is today, they reopened golf courses if they were able to meet certain guidelines. Now, early on, there had been a lot of pushback about the fact that golf courses were not considered to be essential businesses. And the state was quite clear in their guidance that they amended today. Golf courses are still not considered to be essential businesses because their list of essential businesses comes from the federal government. But they did allow, if golf courses meet certain guidelines and they have the approval of the local authorities, they can open. So this afternoon, our golf course here in town reopened to patrons. They're not going to be able to be in golf carts. They're not going to have the rakes out there. They're not going to have ball markers that multiple people can be touching. There has to be hand sanitizer available. Tee times have to be very precise. They have to pay electronically ahead of time. They can't be exchanging credit cards or cash in the pro shop. It's very regimented, but here's an example of how before the 18th, when the governor's reopening advisory council is going to issue their recommendations for how different sectors of society reopen up, they're pivoting, just like Stacey described, how the schools and the educators did a great job, and the students, everybody needed to switch on a moment's notice. Today, golf courses reopened, but there are so many sectors of our society that have been impacted that it's not going to be like flipping a light switch on May 18th. We're not going to just all of a sudden go back to life as normal. There's going to be a new normal, and it's going to consist of people continuing to wear masks for a long time. There's going to be physical distancing requirements. There's going to be restrictions on gathering sizes. These things are not going to all go away in the middle of May. this stuff is going to go on for months and some measures even for years.
I want to put in a plug for our merchants downtown. They've started meeting together, again on Zoom, to try to wrestle with, you know, we don't know, they don't know when retail is allowed to open, but it's a little bit daunting for them. Obviously, some of them live on a shoestring. I certainly did when I owned a store on Central Street many years ago. Their concerns around, will their customers be willing to go into those small spaces? How much do they need to sanitize and all that kind of stuff? How susceptible is clothing and fabric and this, that, and the other thing to carrying the virus or maintaining the virus? I mean, there are a million questions, and you know, we've just started those kinds of conversations. But in any way, shape, or form that we can support them, obviously we want to. And so, you know, we've started the conversation about, if you own property, is there any adjustment that you need? Have you talked to the bank about extension on loans? And, you know, those kinds of things. Just need to remember, you know, we're all in this together, as they say over and over. Going back to the seniors, because obviously they are a very vulnerable population. When we talk about seniors, you know, it's as if we were all one homogenized group, and we're not, you know, not at all. And so I think about the folks that live at Cole Court. I think about the folks who live at Mission Springs, and then the folks that we talked about that live at Timothy Daniels. And then you got a bunch of us that are scattered around town in a million different ways. The folks down at Cole Court and Mission Springs, how are they represented within the community? Is there any centralized place that knows? You can speak for the Bob, for the housing authority, but I often wonder whether or not things just sort of drop through the cracks in those places. My mother used to live at Cole Court. You know, how are things in those two facilities? Bob, I'll let you jump in.
Well, it's interesting because the nature of Cole Court and the nature of Mission Springs are very different living situations.
Yeah.
Mission Springs tends to be more of a close-knit community. There's a lot of support. There's a social worker that's on site. Management is on site, and people gather in the corridors. My mother used to live in Mission Springs, and she said it was the kind of place where everybody knew your business and that was okay. Mission Springs, Cole Court is not like that. The folks at Cole Court tend to be a little more independent. Mm-hmm. Also, the population of Cole Court is not simply seniors. There are other folks. There are some that are physically challenged that also have the opportunity to live there. So it's a little different population. There is much less organization to the management of Cole Court. Actually, we do not have a resident director at Cole Court anymore. We actually subcontract with the Framingham Housing Authority for management of Cole Court, even though we still have our own on-site maintenance. That's actually backed up by Framingham. And we have our own on-site office management, but it is part-time, it's not full-time. So the folks at Cole Court are a little more independent. There are several of the residents at Cole Court are a little more active, and they have a tenant group that actually comes to the Housing Authority meetings on a monthly basis. And it's an opportunity for them to raise issues and to hear from the Housing Authority and the director what the responses might be to things that need to happen. But they're a little bit more on their own. In terms of outreach to them, that's primarily through the senior center, because they are also, a number of them, pretty well connected. They spend time at the senior center, and they're connected with the groups that use the center more frequently. So that's probably the one avenue for exchange of information back and forth. But of course, anybody at Cole Court, they have contact numbers, and they have ways, if they have problems, to get in touch with people. And I will say that the management by the Framingham Housing Authority has really been extraordinarily responsive in the year and a half since we've made an arrangement with them. So
That's
there
good.
has been what I've seen is a significant improvement in the way we're able to respond to things at Cole Court. I see Mike has his hand up.
Yeah, go Mike.
I just want to underscore exactly what the point that Bob was making there at the end. I've found Framingham Housing Authority to be great to work with. And as it relates to this specific public health emergency, we reached out to them weeks ago and said, we would like to put a mask in the hand of every resident at Cole Court. Can you distribute them for us? And FHA employees came, picked up the boxes, they did the distribution. So that was very similar to what we did at Mission Springs. They have a management company that's on site. We reached out to them, we gave them the boxes of masks, and they distributed them. But for this specific public health emergency, both locations weeks ago, long before there was ever a local order and long before there was a state requirement, we had made sure that they had masks so that if they needed to go out and do those essential business, the grocery shopping, picking up prescriptions, we wanted them to feel comfortable going out to those public spaces. And so we had worked with the folks that were on site or have responsibility.
Linda, do you think there are some gaps?
There are. Right now, the office staff at both of those buildings are working much more remotely, so they're not as available to the residents. We see that some of them are not fully understanding the social distancing or the importance of wearing masks when we go there to deliver meals. We particularly have run into struggles at Mission Springs, that we have a designated spot and then the maintenance person delivers to the individual apartments that are getting meals. But every day folks try to come into the area where we're dropping off, and we have to say, you know, we need the distance, we need to stay on the other side of the door until we leave with the meals here. So we are seeing some gaps of that it's still getting hard to get that out to all of the folks. And then certainly the folks that live alone in the community.
I wonder what that would take. If it doesn't change by personal contact, it's probably not going to change.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're already there and you're saying to them, you really can't do this, and they're still doing it, we're probably stuck. I can't do much about that one.
Right. Well, we remind them, and then the other day, the person, well, I have my mask right here, so we.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, but well, when you're out in the hallway in the central area, you need to be wearing it, and just trying to reinforce.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking too, again about the stores. I mean, it's like you almost need signage that just constantly, reminds everybody as you move from one aisle to the next that you've got to do something different than you're used to doing. But anyway.
And anybody like riding our bus, it's a requirement that they have to. And before it became mandated, we've actually been requiring, so that if you want us to take you someplace, it has to be on at all times that you're on the bus.
Yeah. Yeah. Bonnie, are you seeing any gaps, places that anybody should be thinking about doing things?
I think, there's always going to be, those folks that we don't know about. But one of the things that I've been trying to do, like in my church at least, is go through the directory, and even people that we haven't seen in years, I look at their name and I say, gee, do they have anybody, any family that's local? And if I don't know, I call. And I might say, gosh, I know I haven't seen you in a while, and I'm not trying to make you feel guilty and, all of those things, but I've just been thinking about you, and I just wanted to see if you need anything. And I do find that personal touch can mean a lot, but I'm sure there are people we don't know about. But again, I wanted to also say, I have been so impressed with the local store owners here, how fortunate we are to live in a small town. Bill and my husband and I are, seniors, and I have underlying issues. So we really shouldn't be going into stores. our local store, the other day I ordered some candy from Candy Cottage, and Donna's like, oh, on my way home, I'll just leave it on your porch. And I have friends that live in Brookline and Newton, and they're like, you're kidding me. They would do that. They know where you live. They would just leave you. And I'm like, here people will really bend over backwards to try to help. But I think the more we can just talk to people, the more we can keep our ear to the ground. And if we hear that there's a question of someone, do not hesitate to reach out and just say, hey, these are strange times. Normally I wouldn't just be calling you, but just wanted to see how you're doing. But I have been, and if I can go back to one other thing about the work that the chief is doing and the Board of Health and the state, I feel so fortunate because this is not an area that I know anything about. I don't know anything about health or medicine or any of those things. And so I feel, the chief is so trustworthy. I feel like our governor is so trustworthy. And I know that even if they're asking me to do something that I don't want to do, that they have my best interests, the neighbor's best interest at heart. They're not beholden to anybody. They're not trying to, get their picture in the newspaper. They're trying to take care of us. And as someone, again, who has no expertise in this area, Chief, I just want to let you know that I have really appreciated that. And I have, even though we're a hot spot, not Holliston, but Massachusetts, it's even in the midst of a hot spot, I have felt protected and safe. So I want to thank you for that.
Indeed. Agreed. Jackie, what about you? Do we have any gaps that we need to concern ourselves with?
Yeah, I think the families that I think the most about are the families that are sitting at home. Either two parents are working or one parent is an essential worker, or there's needs there, maybe mental health needs that are going on. And I just want those families to know that we know that you do not have the resources you need. We know that, we hear that, and we see you. And what we really want to do is try and connect to those families so that they know that they can come to us if they don't have the internet, if they don't have a way to access us via telehealth. We will find a different way to get to you. And so for those families, we just want them to know that Holliston Youth and Family Services is willing and able to help them with any needs, any needs at all. Even if we're not the right department to be supporting you, we will find you where you need to go. So really consider us like an access point. And that a resource is available to anybody in the community. So there's always needs there, to underscore what Bonnie's talking about. The solidarity of the community is what's going to get us through this. And so the more we come together for our neighbors, for our elderly community members, for our own parents, and be able and willing to support them, the easier it is for those folks who are isolated and alone to feel as though people care about them and are with them right now. So I have two neighbors. One is in kindergarten and her brother's 3 years old. And I just dropped off some Mad Libs and some coloring pages. And, it's the only way, we can just show somebody that, hey, we know you're cooped up at home. Here's some things to help you, and just lets people know that you care about them, you're thinking about them. So, that's the piece that is really sticking out to me right now in terms of how we've gone through this pandemic together as a community. It's really uplifting to hear those stories.
You raised something as an assessor. I get to review the records of people who are asking for exemptions or abatements or whatever for health or whatever reasons and stuff. And Kathy was going to be on today, but she herself is laid up. But, there are some people in there. I think I'm going to go back and make sure with Kathy tomorrow that we're touching all those pots. They are kind of invisible. And at least a couple of them, I'm not sure, have the wherewithal to even get to the phone kind of thing. It's just some of it. And thankfully, there aren't a million of them. It's not like we're overburdened with them or anything, but we should be taking care of them. Jackie, I have one other question for you, and that is, do you think that there is sufficient penetration in the community to know that you are there? Is that an obstacle that you normally find?
Yeah, it's a good point, Mary. I think that every time I have an opportunity to come on shows like this and be a part of stakeholder meetings, or have a large audience you know, my most important mission is just to let people know that we exist and who we are.
Yeah.
You know, we have a pretty large presence now. We have a newsletter, we have social media pages, and so we are out there, you know, in the community, working really hard to make sure people know that we're there. We also, just so families know, we have developed a resource guide, a Holliston area resource guide on our website. And maybe, Chief, we can talk about putting that on the COVID. I'm just thinking out loud, you know, the COVID information page, because that might be another way of people knowing that we exist. But it's a challenge. This is a very unique department for this town.
It is. For the state. I mean, we are, I'm not sure there are many more, or if there are any more, you know, that do it this way. So yeah, we are very unique. And, you know, I think we need to do a better job of somehow getting that word out. It's always been the case, 20 years worth. It's hard to know, but
yeah,
it's always been the case. Yeah. All right. Stacey, you've got a little bit of change up ahead. I'm assuming that the schools will start to rock and roll at some point, but in the meantime, does the school committee continue to meet?
Oh, yes, yes. We meet remotely just like this. So it's the Brady Bunch for me we had been meeting consecutively for a couple of weeks. We have a meeting tonight. So it is the Brady Bunch tonight. We're meeting at 7. The budget subcommittee has been meeting with the finance committee liaisons and Selectwoman Hine weekly on every Wednesday, really to keep talking about the state of finances and what's happening, and you know, what should we be looking at. So yes, we are absolutely meeting.
And you're going to be looking for a new superintendent in all likelihood. And so you've just got another thing on your plate. So all in all, in the middle of the COVID epidemic, virus, whatever, you know, it sounds like the schools are going to be busy.
Yeah, but you know what, Mary? It's really, I had posted this on my Facebook page. I like Reverend was saying, you know, you want to feel grateful for what you have, because some of us, my family is healthy. I've not had loss like some people have. And out of tragedy comes the light. And so I really, this might sound cheeky, it might sound silly. I'm so hopeful, and I think there's so much opportunity to be had. For education, this is amazing for us. We can look and see at what's been working well. Believe it or not, there are some things that are working well with the kids being at home. My children are learning to cook. My children are learning to sew. And you know, we're spending time as a family that we have not had in, you know, as long as my child started sports. So there is opportunity and there's hope. It's going to be a little challenging. It's the hurdles that we have to face to get there. It stinks for me. I'm 5 feet tall, so I can't jump hurdles to begin with. So, you know, we'll do our best. But I do need to see this as an opportunity. And if we don't see this as an opportunity, I think people can just get stuck in negativity. And you know what? The pandemic is negative enough. The world's had enough negativity. I need hope. I do.
Yeah. I'm going to close with you, Michael. I just want to ask if there's any advice from you about these months ahead, because you are right. I know one of your kids who just peeked in the door, Stacey. Anyway, somebody was going to get caught. I was thinking it was going to be me, but anyway, in the months ahead, you know, I don't want to say that there's a euphoria, but there's a willingness now that might start to shatter and tatter as we move into the warmer weather, that we may have a summer place in not Massachusetts, you know, those kinds of things where it's going to start to fray. What are you thinking of in that regard? What are you looking at as we move ahead where those challenges might be?
So I think you really addressed a lot of the issues. First of all, there was a novelty in the first couple weeks in the middle to late March. It was new, it was different. The schools were very careful with their messaging to say this isn't a vacation, we're still delivering curriculum. I think all of the town departments continued to serve the community, but then we got into this groove, and you know, I think it's great. The faith communities in town have adapted their broadcasting online. HCAT is allowing each of the different faith communities on a rotation to be able to share and interact with their congregants. But in the coming weeks, as restrictions start to get loosened, as life starts to adapt to that new normal, there are going to be setbacks, and it's going to be hard because our numbers are going to jump again. And there's going to possibly be some times where things get closed again. There's talk at the state level about what a reclosure. Right now we're focused on reopening, but at the state level, there's still talk about what will this look like in the fall if we have another outbreak that's concurrent with flu, and how is that going to impact services across the spectrum. And the challenge is, as you said, we're here in Massachusetts. We've been a location where there's been an outbreak. There are other parts of the country that were minimally impacted, and they're already starting to reopen. And it's hard when folks from Massachusetts want to go up to their house in Maine, or they want to stop and see relatives in Florida, or as Reverend Bonnie wants to go out to California. It's a challenge. And my admonition, my plea with our community is be patient and listen to the advice that's being given by public health professionals. I appreciate the faith that everyone on this this call and this Just Thinking express in myself and other officials, but not everyone has that same level of trust in decisions that we're making and things that we're communicating. And can we do a better job of communicating? Absolutely. We've got less than 20% of our community that has signed on to our Blackboard Connect system. So when we want to send out a message via email or via text message, not everyone has opted in. The schools do a great job with their Bright Arrow communication system, but parents are a very captive audience. They want to get information from that school. They want to get information from the public school district. But we've got a lot of people in our community who fall between the schools and those that get the senior center newsletter. We've got a lot of people in our community who have not, in the 15 years that we've had a notification system, sign up for it. And then they complain because they're not on social media and they didn't know something happened. And at the end of every warrant for our town meetings, we have the don't forget to sign up for Blackboard. We've done sessions on HCAT before. We put it in the Holliston tab. We talk it up as much as we can, but there's this push-pull that needs to happen. And at some point, people do have to assume some responsibility to get information from local government. But again, my urge, my plea is be patient. We're doing the best we can, and we're not doing anything to try and punish people or to keep them down. We're just trying to keep our neighbors and our friends safe.
Wow, I didn't realize so few people were signed up. I think that's shocking, positively shocking. But anyway, anybody have anything that we haven't said? I don't want to just leave us hanging. Think we're good? All right, folks, I want you all to take care of yourselves and the folks that you have around you. I hope to see you somewhere soon besides on the screen. But anyway, thank you very much for being willing to do this today. I thought it was important to try to get some normalcy, quote unquote, back out there. We were not able to do news shows, but Bruce has been covering things like the ZBA. I watched the ZBA last night. Now, I haven't seen a ZBA meeting, and I can't tell you, been to or otherwise, a ZBA meeting in 100 years. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, thank you all very much. And to the public, to the viewers, Please follow the instructions that are provided by the state. You can contact the local fire station and find a way to get a hold of Michael Cassidy, who is the emergency management director, if you have questions that are of a local nature. Any one of the churches, anybody at town hall. That's one thing we didn't talk about. Town hall is still open, but it's on a sort of a skeleton basis. You can't be sure that the person that you need is there every day. Just call the office. Just reach out if you need something, because there is somebody there that's going to help you. Okay, there really is. You'll be surprised. They will be there. So all my best to all of you. Take care and thank you. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.